Welcome everyone to session 22.
Welcome.
Take it away, Terry.
Take it away. Where are we going? We're going on an adventure. Let's review just a little bit where we left off at the end of our last session, which was 21. Moria was talking about all of the slings and arrows that were coming at specifically HPB, but also directed at the brothers and at the Theosophical Society. And they were coming from all sides, most specifically from the spiritualists who were up in arms because of what Sinnett had said in his book recently published, The Occult World. And it wasn't very flattering to spiritualists. And there were many, many spiritualists at the time, thousands of them, mostly in the UK and in America. It was huge. Spiritualism, the modern form of it, actually took off, I believe, around 1847. I may be wrong on the date, but it was somewhere around there. And it was two sisters in New York, young girls who somehow contacted a spirit, and the spirit started communicating with them by means of raps. And so it was very popular. There were mediums everywhere. So the spiritualists were up in arms. They had been attacked. They were not going to take it lying down, and so they brought out their biggest weapons to combat all of these, what they considered denigrations of their movement. So this is what Moria said to Sinnett in his letter number 34, near the end of it. Since you have fired the first shot in the Pioneer, find the accounts in the Theosophist, and on that data, and on the Tuesday article in one of the newspapers, write a nice pungent letter for her, HPB, signed with her name and Alcott's. This can be published first in the Pioneer, or, if you object to it, in some other paper. Now, Sinnett was the editor of the Pioneer. But at all events, they will have to print it in the form of a circular letter and send it to every paper in the land. And we pointed out that a circular letter is basically the same as a news release, what we would call a news release today.
Or a press release.
A press release. Mm-hmm. Demand retraction from the Statesman. This was the newspaper that had libeled HPB, and threaten it with a lawsuit. If you do this, I promise success. All right, so that sets the stage for the letter that we're going to take up today, which is letter number 35.
Letter number 35, received at Allahabad, December 1881. Before I start reading the letter, who are we hearing from? It's Moria still.
This is Moria, yes.
Okay. I believe verily I am unfit to express my ideas clearly in your language. I never thought of giving any importance to the circular letter I had asked you to draft for them appearing in the Pioneer, or even meant to imply that it should so appear. So that's interesting because the way it sounds, yeah.
So both Paul and I assumed, based on that last letter, that Moria had said, you, Sinnett, write a letter, sign their names to it, publish it in the Pioneer or any other newspaper you choose to, because his bosses didn't like Theosophy. His new bosses, who had recently acquired the newspaper, were devout Christians, and they were not at all interested in Theosophy or even liked it at all. So there was friction between the editor, Sinnett, and his bosses. So wherever you have to publish it, go ahead and do that, is what it sounded like.
Yeah.
But now he's saying that is not what I intended.
I had asked you to compose it for them, send your drafted copy to Bombay, and make them issue it as a circular letter, which, once out and on its rounds in India, might be copied in your journal as other papers would be sure to copy it.
Now, HPB had already, without waiting for Sinnett or any directions from her guru, Maurya, got upset at what was published, and she sent a letter, and we'll see what kind of a letter that was.
He seems to be contradicting himself, though, because he says, I had asked you to compose it, send it, and make them issue it as a circular letter.
And that tells us that they do make mistakes. You would think that maybe he would go back and review it and say, oh, now I see where I was wrong. But obviously and they're very, very busy. So obviously he did not go back and review his letter, or he would have seen that.
Her letter in the Bombay Gazette was foolish, childish, and silly. I have overlooked it. But you must not so labor under the impression that it will undo all the good yours has done. There are a few sensitive persons whose nerves it will set off, but the rest won't appreciate its true spirit, nor is it in any way libelous, only vulgar and foolish. I will force her to stop. So let's explain what she did.
Well, she wrote a letter just out of anger, off the top of her head, and expressed her feelings at that moment. And as Maurya pointed out, it was nothing libelous. She didn't accuse anybody falsely of anything. She simply wrote a letter which, to the English people, would find extremely offensive, because they, no matter how angry they are or how upset they are about something, will pretend that they're completely calm. It's part of their expected comportment is to always remain completely calm and speak, at least pretend to speak from a non-emotional point of view, regardless of what you're actually feeling. So it grated on the nerves of the English people completely. So he said it was silly, it was dumb, it was foolish, but nothing that we need to worry too much about.
She didn't get it approved by the bosses.
No, she didn't.
And again, to our viewers, it's in response to being slandered by the spiritualism.
Today would say, well, she was absolutely right to do that, or had every right to do that. But in those days, you had to do things very according to English protocol.
At the same time, I must say that she suffers acutely, and I am unable to help her. For all this is the effect from causes which cannot be undone. Occultism and theosophy. She now has to either conquer or die. When the hour comes, she'll be taken back to Tibet. So she's suffering because she's been using so much of her energy to be the conduit or the means by which all these communications are happening.
Right. She knew years ago that this was going to happen. She just didn't know to what extent. It was probably much greater than she ever dreamed of. And perhaps even the Mahatmas, they don't know exactly what the response is going to be to anything they do. But it's completely due to the fact that they are introducing the ancient wisdom teachings, doctrine, to the Western world, not as just an interesting artifact to study, some kind of cultural oddity, but as a legitimate philosophy of life that not only teaches people how to operate properly in life in such a way that it would make your life better, but that is actually how life works. And several times they explain, we're not interested in a fantasy that depends on some God somewhere that manipulates everything and creates the rules and then punishes people when they don't follow those imaginary rules. This is all natural, 100% natural. And that is what occultism is. It is a higher degree of awareness of how life works, the natural flow of life, and the operative forces in life.
It's so well said. This guy's good, isn't he? So well said. It's also a call to action for those of us who want to walk the path. It's a call to action to synchronize as best we can with nature, with the natural processes, so we don't find extra suffering. When we have extra suffering in life, notice you're probably going against the natural flow of things. Go with the flow, it's less sufferful.
And that's the simplicity of the message. Occultism is only that. Stop going against the flow of nature.
Yes.
You will suffer. You think you're going to turn the entire universe around to your way of thinking and your way of doing things? Have at it. Go for it. 30, 40, 100, 600 lifetimes. You'll still be suffering at the end of all that time.
I wish we could inject something into everyone so they know that, because you can't. At some point we'll know. At some point you'll know that that's what's happening. Why is life so hard? Hold the mirror up and see what you're doing.
And there's a purpose for it. You know,
there is a purpose for it,
love
yes.
nothing better than to wave a magic wand and
Yes.
all of a sudden everyone is perfect.
Yeah.
Not only does life not work that way, but it wouldn't actually help anybody.
Because the learning wouldn't actually be absorbed.
There would be no
There'd be
learning
yeah.
whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's just like a kid who goes out and gets in trouble, and the parents say, "Oh, I've got to fix that. I'll call the attorney I know, and he knows the judge real well, and he'll fix everything. Don't worry, you'll be fine." And then they don't learn their lesson. So it's the same in life. If somebody tries to fix things for us, we don't learn the lesson.
Okay. She now has to either conquer or die. Oh, I was going to ask you, though. He says he's unable to help her, but they definitely do help her. I mean, she would have probably died many years earlier if they hadn't helped her.
Unable to help her when it has anything to do with karma. And they're very strict on that.
Okay.
They point out time and again, they cannot interfere with their chelas, karma. If they have done something that brings a retribution to them, they're not going to mess with that. They're not going to step
really
in and
interesting.
fix it for them.
I wonder, though, in her case, let's just say, for example, that she developed emphysema or something because of her smoking and she was going to die. I feel like they would give her some extra prana to stay alive longer. I don't know, but that would be messing with, in a way, it's messing with her karma, but in a way, she's helping humanity at such a high level. They need her. They need her.
And here's what happens. As we pointed out before, you're never supposed to interfere with that or tell a lie, because there is karma that comes along with that. They weigh that and they say, does the good outweigh the karma that we personally are going to have to take on ourselves?
And they are taking on.
And they do that
yes,
sometimes.
sometimes.
In rare instances, they absolutely do.
Yes.
And it costs them. It is a sacrifice on their part, but they do it for the good of humanity, not to save a person.
Right. The reward makes sense. It makes. Okay. When her time comes, she'll be taken back to.
So we don't know what they meant by that. Does it mean what if she gets really sick, then we will somehow bring her back to Tibet, which had been an enormous undertaking to get her into Tibet at the time she was about to die? Or does it mean once she leaves her physical body, her higher self will return immediately to Tibet, to the ashram? And that is more likely the scenario. No one knows for sure.
Do not blame the poor woman, blame me. She is but a shell at times, and I am often careless in watching her. If the ball isn't returned to the statesman's court, and the statesman is the newspaper that was publishing the slander, right?
Right.
If the ball isn't returned to the statesman's court, it will be caught up by other papers and flung at her again.
She is but a shell at times, and I am often careless in watching her. Because she was trained in Tibet for, at different times, a total of 7 years of training, she had learned enough that she was not allowed to go back out into the world without their supervision and without a part of her being retained in Tibet for two reasons: to serve as a transmission point, a connection between her part, whatever part was there in Tibet, and her physical, emotional personality in the outer world, 1,000 or 5,000 miles away, wherever she happened to be, and also to serve as a guarantee that there was this connection, that she could never reveal anything that should not be revealed. And there are numerous secret bits of information that have to be carefully safeguarded, because in the wrong hands, it could be detrimental to all of humanity.
The masters were it was almost like a threat.
Well,
they were holding a hostage situation.
It is, and it's not without her approval.
Right, she agreed to it, right. Do not feel despondent. Courage, my good friend, and remember that by helping her, you are working off your own law of retribution. Nice. She receives more than one cruel fling because of KH's friendship for you, because he is using her as the means of communication, the conduit we were talking about. She provides the energy. Mm-hmm. But courage. I saw the lawyer's papers and perceived that he is averse to taking up the case. Now, the lawyer is the person that may be defending them against the slanderers.
So apparently Sinnett had already contacted a lawyer and said, hey, we're thinking of filing a lawsuit against this newspaper for slander. And the Moria is saying, well, I checked on this guy, and he really doesn't want to file a lawsuit. Lots of attorneys don't like to do that. They don't like to go to court. For some of them love it because it's attention. But this guy didn't really want to file a lawsuit. But go ahead with what he says.
But for the little he is needed, he will do. No lawsuit will help, but publicity for the purpose of vindication works as well as in the question of accusation. 10,000 circular letters sent throughout India to prove the accusations false. Yours till the morrow, M.
Now, I don't know if he was intending for Sinnett to spend the money to print 10,000 letters. That would be enormously expensive in 1881, but maybe he did. Printing was a huge business in those days because there was no way to duplicate anything. They didn't have copy machines, no mimeographs, nothing except for taking something to a printer, setting up the type just as if you were going to print a book or a newspaper, and then printing them one by one by one.
So at the end of the letter here, are we to believe that he wants these to be physically printed and sent, or not?
Either that, or send out a bunch of them, and hopefully the newspapers will propagate it as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm not certain, but it could very well be that he meant 10,000 letters.
But we still don't know for sure if he intended for Sinnett to send it and do it, or not. He does want him to do something. Because he's contradicting himself a little bit.
No, what he intended was write the letter, send it to Bombay, to Alcott and to HPB to review. We'll discuss it, take some time back and forth, make some changes, and then go ahead and take up your part of it. But he didn't explain it well at all. Yeah. So that's on Moria. He gets a point deducted for that. Now, This one was written in December, and it's not known what part of December, early, middle, late. But that was farther along in the period of K.H. Tong Pag Ni.
We're referring to letter number 37 that we're going to be stepping into here in a moment. That's
Yes. So number 36 we did cover in a previous session because it was out of order. So we are skipping from 35 to 37 now, but it's in the proper order. K.H. was in Samadhi for 90 days. We think if we can attain Samadhi for a minute, that's an incredible achievement. He was in a state of Samadhi for 90 days. His body had been paralyzed. It had, through mesmeric passes and other procedures, his body had been put in a state of paralysis for 90 days. And his spirit was traveling and exploring interstellar space. We don't know what galaxies he visited, perhaps different planets, different civilizations. None of that has been revealed. But he was on an adventure for 90 days.
And we can speculate on the purpose.
Well, the purpose is education, and it was a type of initiation. He apparently is on his way to becoming a bodhisattva, which is a step along the way to becoming a Buddha. So this is a major, major step. Not very many adepts ever get this opportunity. He's an incredible exception to the normal flow of things.
Is that the case, though? But I thought every single soul
Eventually,
Yeah.
but at this stage of his training, it would be very unusual as far as I can tell.
Okay. But it is a stage that every human, really, every soul, every master, every adept will go through at some point in the very far future.
Apparently, K.H. had only been a master for 25 or 26 years at this point, so that is really
fast.
unusual.
Really fast, yeah.
Almost never would that happen normally.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So now we're going to see at the end of the 90 days what happens.
I think it's also important to mention that this letter is not written by either of the two masters we've been hearing from.
Right. This is from someone we've heard of before, but we've only heard of in very short statements. Who is it?
His name is Djual Khul, or DK.
Yeah.
And they're referring to him sometimes as the disinherited, since his family removed him from the will.
Yeah. When he took up occultism, they're like, either you give that up or else you're not part of our family. And he says, well, guess what? Wipe me out of the will.
And he was a human being. He had a physical body, as the others did. He's a new master. Is he is an adept at this point, a master?
Not yet.
Not yet. He's a chela.
He's a very high chela.
Okay.
They refer to him in other places, HPB does, as a first degree chela. And some people have interpreted that as a first level. But no, it's like first degree as being the highest of the levels.
Uh-huh. And I think we should also say, though, that this individual has been maybe adopted by various spiritual organizations. He's one of the, I'm going to say, pop culture ascended masters. Can I say that? I mean, if you Google it, you'll see pictures of him, which may or not may be real, and he's associated to other organizations as well.
Well, they are not real because any photos of him were some clairvoyance perception of what he looked like.
So the one picture that I've seen, we're not going to probably emphasize that because we don't think that's...
No,
okay.
I wouldn't. Now, some other people may have other ideas of the source of that photo or that image, but as far as I know, it was a clairvoyant who came up with that.
So this letter is from DK. Djual Khul. It starts off by saying private, period.
And the meaning that none of this is to be revealed to anybody except people that KH allows it to be revealed to.
Honored Sir, the Master has awaked and bids me write.
Now, you notice he has kind of a stilted form of English that he uses.
Awaked.
Awaked.
That might have been acceptable then, though.
It obviously was. Mm-hmm. We would say has awakened or
woken up.
Has woken up or woke up.
To his great regret, for certain reasons, he will not be able, until a fixed period has passed, to expose himself to the thought currents inflowing so strongly from beyond the Himavat.
All right, now, you are aware of it, but in his writing, whenever he refers to KH and says he, it's capitalized, just like Jesus in the Bible always is capitalized, he. And obviously, he has tremendous honor for KH, who is his master. So he is very devoted to this man that he reveres so greatly that he capitalizes his pronouns. And many theosophists have adopted that too. In older books, you'll see that quite often. Anytime any master is referred to, they'll capitalize the pronouns. But we'll see another letter from KH where he specifically states, we are not so exalted that we require the use of capitalization when referring to us. So that's why I don't follow that tradition.
And what is meant by the Himavat?
Himavat is the Hindu conception that the Himalayas are divine. There is a God. It is the physical incarnation of a God named or referred to as Himavat. So just like the Ganges is also a goddess, different physical phenomena that are grandiose in their nature are considered to be the representation on earth of some god.
I am therefore commanded to be the hand to write his message.
Now, let us point out too, DK is not Hindu. He wasn't born in India. He is Tibetan. So he was not raised, as far as I know, as a Hindu, but more likely as a Tibetan Buddhist.
I am to tell you that he is, quote, quite as friendly to you as heretofore, and well satisfied with both your good intentions and even their execution so far as it lay in your power. You have proved your affection and sincerity by your zeal. The impulse you have personally given to the cause we love, will not be checked. Therefore, the fruits of it, the word reward is avoided being used but for the goody-goody, will not be withheld when your balance of causes and effects, your karma, is adjusted.
So is
there an end quote there, or is that?
He's writing this in the words of KH, but still in a very different style from what KH would use himself. So it's kind of interesting, but the use of the word goody-goody, KH used that in a letter quite a few sessions back where he laughed at Sinnett, who had written that term in a letter, and he said it made him smile because he found that kind of funny that someone would be referred to as a goody-goody.
In unselfishly and at personal risk, laboring for your neighbor, you have most effectually worked for yourself. 1 year has wrought a great change in your heart. The man of 1880 would scarcely recognize the man of 1881 were they to meet. Compare them, then, good friend and brother, that you may fully realize what time has done, or rather what you have done with time.
So this marks around, let's see, a year and a half, a little more than a year and a half since the communication started, which would have been around September of 1880, and now we're in January of 1881. 1882, correct. And so more than a year and a half has passed, and he's saying, you have made an enormous amount of progress in that time. You take the time to look back and compare the two men from when you first heard of us or met us, received correspondence from us, and the man you are today.
That's amazing. To do this, meditate alone with the magic mirror of memory to gaze into.
So, yeah, take the time to actually think about it. Meditate on it.
Thus shall you not only see the lights and shadows of the past, but the possible brightness of the future as well. Thus, in time, will you come to see the ego of aforetime in its naked reality.
Now here I don't know, he capitalizes egos, so he may mean the higher self. Theosophists at that time liked to use that word because it wasn't yet used in the psychological term that we know it today. So they often spoke of the ego as being the higher self.
Because Freud and Jung hadn't come along yet and
they
identified.
They were shortly after this, not very long.
Weren't they early 1900s, I think?
In the late 1800s, I believe.
Okay.
Even.
Now, this sentence is strange because it sounds like it's a question, but it's not. Thus, in time, will you come to see the ego of aforetime in its naked reality?
Exactly. It's a statement. It's not a question.
Oh, so you will come to see.
It's an old-fashioned way of reversing the order that we're used to.
So he's encouraging Sinnett. He's saying, meditate, do this work, and you'll meet your higher self, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You're getting there. You're making progress. You're very close.
It's important that we say that because this sentence wouldn't make sense to.
Yes, true.
Okay. And thus also you shall hear from me direct at the earliest practicable opportunity, for we are not ungrateful, and even nirvana cannot obliterate good. Wow.
So he's really hoping at this point that Sinnett is on the verge of being able to communicate directly with him. If he can just make that further leap to get in touch with his higher self, then they can make it happen. Then they can start doing some serious work.
This is really interesting to kind of contemplate because I don't want to deviate too much, but that's a clue.
Yes.
Sinnett and Hume aren't some spiritual. They're not wearing turbans, claiming that they meditate all day. And I'm being a little facetious when I say turbans, but they're not claiming to be these super spiritual people that practice these deep pranayama methods and they raise their consciousness and astral travel. They don't do that.
No.
At all. And yet, guess who's talking to the masters? It's them, because they're good people. They have good in them. They have influence. They have maybe just a couple tweaks in their character to be very good and very powerful. That's a clue. Be a good person. Don't try to hold your breath for 3 hours and think you're going to become super kundalinified.
Or take out vegetarianism, or all of these exterior things that we think are absolutely necessary. That's exactly what we want to know. What are the essential things that we need? Let's get those first. The other things can all be added at the proper moment.
You can be a yogi without ever sitting in a lotus position.
Yes. Yes.
That's important. Okay. These are the master's words. So he's talking about KH. As with his help, I am enabled to frame them in your language, honored sir. I am personally permitted at the same time to thank you very warmly for the genuine sympathy which you felt for me at the time when a slight accident due to my forgetfulness laid me on my bed of sickness. KH is saying that.
Yeah, no, this is DK. So he said, everything I've said so far is DK speaking to you. But he's allowing me to interject a personal message from myself.
Sure.
He said, remember a few weeks before when DK was, and he calls it a slight accident, exaggeration of, terms. It was not a slight accident. He almost died. He was careless and very possibly stepped on something that had been planted by one of the red caps, the Dugpas, to trip or cause a fall of one of these chelas so that they would fall to their death, because that was their form of amusement, apparently. And it was only because he was with another chela who was able to stop that from happening. But even though he did fall, he didn't fall to his death. So it took him several weeks to recover. He was in bedfast for several weeks. And it took him quite a while to recover. And he said, thank you for your kind thoughts. He said, I felt every one of them from beyond the Himalayas. And I appreciate your healing message, your healing energy.
Check the comments below. We'll link to a different episode where we explain who the red caps are. So we don't need to explain it again now. Read below and you can click and go to that episode, that session. Though you may have read in the modern works on mesmerism how that which we call will essence and you fluid is transmitted from the operator to his objective point, you perhaps scarcely realize how everyone is practically, although unconsciously, demonstrating this law every day at every moment.
Now we're back to KH speaking.
Okay, this is, is there any context here?
He's talking about the thoughts, the healing thoughts that Sinnett had sent to DK, and comparing it to mesmerism, the mesmerism that Alcott would practice to heal people, and that the Mahatmas and their chelas use in a different form. They call it something different, but it's very, very similar.
I think it would be useful for me to read that again then. So now that we hear that, I'll just read that sentence again. Though you may have read in the modern works on mesmerism how that which we call will essence and you fluid is transmitted from the operator to his objective point, you perhaps scarcely realize how everyone is practically, although unconsciously, demonstrating this law every day and at every moment. This is very interesting.
Everything you think about another person affects that person, whether you realize it or not. You're creating karma by your thoughts. When Jesus said, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And he said, if you think of seducing a woman, even in your mind, you are committing adultery of a sort. If
you're married, yes. I love how they're speaking as yoga teachers, yoga philosophers, really. And as Terry just mentioned, our thoughts do create karma. Also, our thoughts affect others.
Yes.
Literally.
Yes.
Tangibly is what he's...
And the more power you have, the greater the amount of karma, because the greater the effect.
The greater the effect. I'm sure many of you have heard of prayer groups or transmission meditation groups or creating collective intentions. Well, that stuff works, and he's saying that they do work.
Yes.
Getting together and sending good thoughts to another group or another person, that works.
Yeah, exactly.
It works. And he's saying that. I love how there are so many little nuggets. Continuing on, nor can you quite realize how the training for adeptship increases both one's capacity to emit and to feel this type of force.
Yeah.
Practice your yoga and meditation, you'll be more powerful to send and more sensitive to receive.
And that's why they are so careful about who they share these secrets with. Because in the wrong hands, you're going to create horrible karma for yourself, and it could destroy your, not just this life, but many, many lives to come.
It's true. I assure you that I, though but a humble chela as yet, felt your good...
Okay, so he is still talking for himself.
Yeah, we kind of thought that, right?
Okay, yeah, I thought maybe KH had taken over again, but it was still DK referring to himself.
He's a humble chela as yet. I felt your good wishes flowing to me as the convalescent in the cold mountains feels from the gentle breeze that blows upon him from the plains below. That's nice.
Yeah,
wow.
Very poetic again.
So even though Sinnett isn't a skilled, efficient meditator per se,
yeah,
it still works.
Well, and it's also based on the perception of these individuals who are very high chela, and his master, of course, they're going to be aware of it, even if it's a very faint force.
Let's make this even more practical. We won't take long to do this, but how do you do this? Develop a clear vision, a clear picture of the person that you're sending these thoughts to, the person or the group of people or the situation that you want to send either healing or good energy to. A clear picture without any, as defined as possible, like develop your clarity. That's where the practice of focus comes into play. And then sense them either being bathed in light or sense from your own heart or third eye projecting good energy to them, and stay focused on that. If you can only focus for 3 seconds, that won't be as powerful. Then your mind goes to dinner later or bring your mind back. The longer you can stay focused, that's what we're talking about. It's very simple to do, not easy, but simple. That's the process.
This is the difference between prayer and affirmation, or this practice, whatever you want to call it. A prayer is just a kind of rote, repeating basically the same formula over and over. Please, somebody, whoever you're praying to, can you help this person? It does help slightly, but the biggest help is when you send a very strong, positive flow of energy to this person, not from some God that you're hoping will help you, but from yourself.
Yes.
Do it yourself.
A good technique is to imagine like your third eye, like a projector beam to the heart of the person, and sense a connection of a flow from your heart, something projecting from you and landing, kind of soaking or satiating the recipient in light, and just keep your mind on that and positive. That it works. The more focus you have, the longer you do it, and the more you repeat it, the greater will be the effect. It's that simple. The cause has to be, the effect will be dependent upon the cause that you send out, the strength of that, the duration, and the energy that goes along with it. We'll put a link below to a meditation video that I have where we do a guided healing practice. So link below for a guided healing practice. All right, continuing along. I am also to tell you that a certain Mr. Bennett of America will arrive soon in Bombay.
Okay, Mr. Bennett. This is another one. Again, this is a challenge for Sinnett and also for all kinds. Mr. Bennett was a man, philosopher in America who was arrested and imprisoned because he spoke out against Christianity. And so some of these Christians who didn't like his message about the evils of the practice of Christianity in its organized form conspired to trap him into sending what they said were obscene information through the mails. He was convicted and imprisoned for a year.
Whoa.
A year. And it was nothing he said was false. It was just that they took offense at it. Remember at the time that in many Christian countries, you could be prosecuted for blasphemy. If you take the name of the Lord in vain in public or in anything you publish, you can be prosecuted. I don't know if anyone actually went to prison for that, but they absolutely could be prosecuted for it.
Sounds no different than, being tried for treason if you speak out against the king or an emperor back in the Roman or even any monarchical situation.
So he had spent a year in prison for nothing but his opinions. And 100,000 people had signed a petition, sent it to the President of the United States, Rutherford B. Hayes, and demanded that he be released, that he be pardoned. He wouldn't do it.
Wow.
He didn't want to offend his Christian voters.
You may recognize one who, despite his national provincialism, which you so detest, and his non-Christian bias, is one of our agents, unknown to himself, to carry out the plan for the liberation of Western thought from superstitious creeds.
So one more
Wow.
instance where the Mahatmas choose a person who can help transmit ideas to the outer world, and it's completely unknown to themselves.
This is amazing.
We are convinced that Eckhart Tolle is one of these people who they have used, maybe with or without his knowledge, to transmit ideas to other people.
And this is a great time to just mention how the masters work behind the scenes.
Yes.
This is how they do it. They're extremely busy, as we've said many times, and Terry mentioned in this session that they're very busy. Now, are they out doing errands and driving around having meetings with foreign diplomats? Not. They might make a public appearance somewhere, but not as a master. But what they're normally doing is they're in either their ashram or at their home or in the mountains somewhere, far away from anybody, in a state of deep meditation, sending out these positive thoughts, ideas, help through the mental realm, not the astral, but the mental, to people like Mr. Bennett, who may not even realize where his inspiration comes from. It might come from Bennett's higher self, but it's also, according to this letter, it's proof that the masters are assisting from behind the scenes. And it's not a command. They're not taking control of Mr. Bennett. That's not their intention. They don't want that because that's karma for them too. They're offering it, and if the person has enough openness, is open-minded enough, look what they can receive and look what they can do with it. That's what they're doing. They're sending, that's how they help the world. It's up to us to receive it, right? It's up to us.
Yes, exactly. And we never know if we're a devout, intentional student of this sort of thing. We never know when they're using us as a potential helper in the outer world. The more we put ourselves in tune with them, the greater the possibility that will happen. And imagine whatever level of intention that we can send to another person, that of a master is 1,000 or 10,000 times stronger. So imagine the difference in the effect that they have.
This process that we're describing and the way this happens does not sit well with egoic people or people who like to question everything. Like I like to question everything. Me, I have learned to accept more and to practice more non-attachment to the specifics, because I feel in my heart, in my higher self, that this is how it works. I used to, and I still do ask, well, wouldn't it be so much easier if they just told me, like appeared to me and said, I'm Mr. DK and I'm telling you this is what, wouldn't that be easier? No, because as we said earlier, that doesn't teach me to calm my lower self, reach my higher self, receive something, and then decide with my own discernment, is this something of value or not? That wouldn't be developed, or that wouldn't happen if it was given to me in a letter. This is DK, here are your instructions, go. There's no ownership in that. That's why we have to rise up and become our own generals in our own army instead of just being told what to do. That's the reason that it's mysterious in a way.
And this is a good time to point out that everything that was going on at this point in time was a very unusual experiment, completely out of the ordinary manner in which the Mahatmas normally operate. Normally, no one would be receiving physical letters and notes from one of them unless they were a very highly developed chela of theirs. None of these people in the outer world would be receiving any of these little hints and outright instructions on how to accomplish certain things.
As far as we know, it hadn't happened before, and as far as we know, it hasn't happened since.
Exactly. So today it's totally different. They've gone back to their normal method, which is you have to reach the level of a strong connection with your higher self before they can give you anything that would be even slightly concrete. And it's probably not going to be in the form of a note or anything like that. It's going to be a very strong feeling, sometimes exact words, but more often it's just a concept that forms in your mind. You have no way of identifying or verifying if it comes from your higher self, from a chela, or from one of the Mahatmas themselves, and it really doesn't matter.
Right.
It does not matter who it comes from, as long as it is legitimate and helpful information. That's the only thing you need to know.
It could, unfortunately, also be with nefarious intention. It could be that, and that's why discernment and just your own character development is the most important thing. We can be tricked as well. I mean, things happen that are not benevolent in the inner realms as well.
And that's going to come up in the next letter, a completely different letter from this one.
This is such a good conversation. One more thing. So the question that has been on my mind, and we've mentioned this a lot, but this is a good place to mention it again. So why are there so many messages available now? If you Google anything about channeled messages or anything like, I know we say this a lot, but we can't emphasize enough that please use your discernment and you decide if there are tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of sources for someone on earth today with a body that's alive that says that they're the mouthpiece for some exalted spiritual being. There's never an end to that. So why are there so many? I'm going to just say right now, it's because that person has a lot of ego and they think that they're special enough to be the mouthpiece for God. You have to decide on your own what is valuable and what is not.
And that's absolutely correct. Discernment is the very first qualification you need to make any degree. Viveka, we call it discernment, used to be called discrimination. You have to be able to sort through this stuff and figure out what is useful, what has an ulterior motive behind it.
I don't think Eckhart Tolle has ever said once that he channels anybody or that he receives any type of, he's never said that. He's getting it from somewhere. I mean, it doesn't matter. And guess what? He doesn't say. See, I think that's a clue. If they don't ever say, that's a clue that it might be real.
Exactly. So look for ego, both in the messenger and in the channeler.
Yeah.
Look for ego on both of those parts.
I know we go off on tangents sometimes, but it's so important to tie this into modern day practicality and what we're faced with in this year. Hope you might not be watching it in 2024, but this is what's going on and we want to make it relevant. So
our goal is exactly the same as the goal of the Mahatmas and the goal of the Buddha, to decrease the suffering in the world. That's it. Nothing else. We're not trying to increase the number of subscribers or the number of views we get. We do not care. It's only about, can we give people some tools and some knowledge, some information that will help them live a more productive life with less stress and with less suffering in the world that you can share with other people after you've applied it yourself. Save yourself first and then try to help other people.
All right, let's finish up this letter. Let's see, Western thought. All right, the last sentence let's see. If you can see your way towards giving him a correct idea of the actual present and potential future state of Asiatic, and more particularly of Indian thought, it will be appreciated by my master. He desires me to let you know that you should not feel any reluctance about taking on the work left undone by Mr. Hume. That gentleman chooses to do only that which suits his personal fancy without any regard whatever to the feelings of other people.
So Hume had written a few articles to be published in the Theosophist magazine. And then he got bored with it and he was dithering, and K.H. told D.K. to let Sinnett know, do not be the least bit hesitant to pick up from where he left off and go ahead and start writing articles of your own under this same column in the Theosophist magazine.
His present work also, a mound of intellectual energy misspent, is calculated only to exonerate himself. Master regrets to find in him the same spirit of utter unconscious selfishness with no view to the good of the cause he represents.
So Hume is being his typical self, totally fixated on his own ego and his need to stroke his ego, and petulant and easily offended. So the Mahatmas are treating him with kid gloves, and they're treating Sinnett very differently. They're treating him as a Confederate who shows great potential.
Confederate?
Well, someone that they can trust, a Confederate, as in somebody on our side that we're working with.
Okay.
I'm not talking politics.
Okay. If he seems interested in it at all, it is because he is opposed and finds himself roused to combativeness. Thus, the answer to Mr. Terry's letter, sent to him from Bombay, ought to have been published in the January number.
So Mr. Terry was an Australian who was very interested in theosophy and had written to someone asking more information, and he was very serious about his questions. So the Mahatmas were aware of that, and they're referring to this.
Will you kindly see to it? Master requests. Master, he's referring to him as Master. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Master thinks you can do it as well as Mr. Hume if you just try. As the metaphysical faculty in you is only dormant, but would fully develop were you to awaken it to its full activity by constant use. Amazing. You practice makes perfect. You practice meditation, you'll get better at it. You practice raising your consciousness, you will. It's amazing.
So he's been tested for more than a year and a half, and so far he's passing the test, making quite a few mistakes along the way, but
it's normal. That's expected.
They're very patient with these aspirants up to a point. And Sinnett is still making enough progress and putting forth enough effort that they're completely behind him still.
That's like you're in my relationship. You're very patient with me up to a point.
Oh, it's...
No, actually, he has infinite patience with me, and I appreciate that. Not infinite?
I told you, it's in our contract.
We signed the contract before.
We signed the contract.
Which I'm grateful for.
There's no contract on the physical plane. It's somewhere else.
Correct. As to our revered M, with the 3 dots signifying his...
Whenever he mentions Master Morya, he refers to him as Master M, and then he puts 3 dots in the form of a triangle, because when Morya signs his name, it's usually this really ornate script, and at the end of it, he puts 3 dots.
Let's try to find an image to show for that.
We will. Mm-hmm. We'll actually, I will We will put an image up
Yeah.
at this point so that you can see what that looks like.
He desires me to assure you that the secret of Mr. Hume's professed love for humanity lies in and is based upon the chance presence in that word of the first syllable.
So what's the first syllable of humanity?
Oh my gosh, that is hilarious.
So
He's being funny about
so
that.
KH is being funny through DK.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. As for, quote, mankind, he has no sympathy for it.
Yeah, so he's pointing out it's all ego with Hume.
Well, I might need to retract some of my statements earlier about how they've chosen Sinnett and Hume because they are good people who can be worked with. Sinnett for sure, but maybe not Hume.
Hume is a dichotomy.
Right.
He has some really, really sterling qualities, but he has some really bad negative qualities. So it's very iffy with him. Sinnett has some bad qualities, but they're fairly minor, and his good qualities are very good. So they're more focused, and they think he shows more potential.
DK, well, KH really, he's complimenting Sinnett's metaphysical faculties, and I wonder what Hume's clairvoyant nature is. I wonder if it's...
They never mentioned that I can remember much about that. I'm afraid his ego overshadows any that he might
veils it
have.
too much. Since Master will not be able to write to you himself for a month or two longer, though you will always hear of him, he begs you to proceed for his sake with your metaphysical studies, and do not be giving up the task in despair whenever you meet with incomprehensible ideas in Moria Sahib's notes.
So Cage is still kind of poking Moria behind the scenes here. The two of them are so funny. He's like, yeah, I know that Moria, my brother Moria, is giving you all of these cosmological notes that you're probably not ready for, but don't give up in despair.
He says incomprehensible ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Sahib means brother?
Well, it's sir, it's friend, it's a slight term of endearment in Arabic.
The more so as Moria Sahib's only hatred in life is for writing. Really?
Yeah, he before he got into this spree of writing to Sinnett mostly, he said, I have almost never written and I hate writing. But now he's said, yeah, I kind of like this idea of writing to people.
That's fun.
At least to this one person.
In conclusion, Master sends you his best wishes, and praying that you may not forget him, orders me to sign myself, your obedient servant, the disinherited.
So we see, again, the relationship of one chela with one of the Mahatmas that we are dealing with. And they love and revere these people. They are so appreciative of what they have received that their connection, just like that of Moria and KH, is like this. And that's how it has to be. There can't be any ego that makes a separation. There can't be any discord. They can disagree on things, but not in a violent, not in an emotional way. They will discuss it. And generally, one will convince the other that they are that they have a more valid point of view, but not always. And it sometimes may be the chela that has a very good point, and the Mahatma may say, you know what, I think you may be right about that. So they discuss it. They don't get in this fight about, well, I'm right. I know I'm right. No, it's like, well, this is the way I see it. How do you see it? And then they discuss it very calmly and openly, and they don't have to come to an agreement. If sometimes they say, well, we're looking at from two different points of view, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as it doesn't cause harm to anyone. That's the main criteria.
That's a good way to practice conflict resolution in any situation.
Exactly.
There is a PS here.
We can have disagreements, but as long as nobody is harmed, then we can just say, we can call it two different points of view and leave it at that.
PS. Should you desire to write to him, although unable to answer himself, Master will receive your letters with pleasure. You can do so through D.K. Mavalankar, who's Djual Khul.
And then he signed it, capital D, small d, his abbreviation of disinherited.
Oh, got it. Got it.
So it's interesting to note that KH is not able to communicate directly at this point because of this incredible 90-day experience he's had. There's a long recovery period that goes along with that, mentally, physically, etc. So he has to watch his situation very carefully. He's still obviously aware of what's going on in the outer world, but he's not able to interact with it just yet because of the period of time it takes to adapt from what he's been experiencing for 90 days to come back into this very different state of being. All right, so that was a very interesting letter. In our next session, we're going to cover a very different letter. But in all of these, we gain more and more insight on what it looks like to become one of the chelas of these adepts. And we're getting some real helpful insight into what we have to do in order to achieve that. We've pointed out in previous sessions, and it never hurts to reiterate it, neither Paul nor I claimed, or are we masters? We are not. We're not anywhere close to being a master unless you're not revealing something to me.
Yeah, right.
But I'm not. I'm nowhere close. And neither one of us claims to be an accepted pupil of one of these masters. We're not. It's that simple. So what are we? We're students. We're aspirants like anybody else. We have spent a lot of years studying what is available, meditating on it, comparing notes, teaching classes about what we've learned so far. But that's it. We're nothing but students, and that's good enough. That's where we are right now.
Exactly. And then it doesn't matter where we are because everyone is going through a similar path and process. Any progress is good progress. Any progress in the right direction is all we can ask for.
As Paul points out time and time again, there are 60 billion paths to achieve enlightenment, to get to nirvana. 60 billion different paths. Each one is going to be different. No two people are going to follow the same path. So you and another person can be at fairly equal levels of development, and yet you will be completely different, and you may not, or you may be able to work together. It depends on you, whether you're willing to work with someone who is following a very different path. Maybe you need to stick with people who follow the same, relatively the same path that you are following. It all depends. These Mahatmas have pupils who are very, very different. And some of those pupils can work together. Some of them don't work real well together. And it doesn't matter because they achieved enough experience to where they can interact with people much more readily than we may be willing to. Our prejudices and our ego may still be getting in the way with us, But they've overcome that, so they can work with more people than maybe I can. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So what we can do is try to emulate them. Overcome any prejudices that you still have lingering within you. Develop this love, profound love of humanity. The more we study these things, the more we realize that they have an excellent sense of humor. They never take themselves too seriously. They can joke about something in one breath and in the next talk about something so profound it makes your head spin. and they do it with equanimity. This profound love they have for everyone, lack of ego, lack of need to feel important, more important than somebody else, that's what we have to learn ourselves.
That will reduce suffering. It will.
That's exactly it. As we've pointed out before, the only suffering they have is because of their love of humanity and working with those of us who are still suffering in the outer world. On their own, there would be no suffering.
Thank you for sticking with us. Please ask questions in the comments and we will reply. We would love to have a dialogue. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for coming along.
Namaste.